The day Harper slipped and almost fell on the cold floor, something no one could believe actually happened. The man who had been silent for 20 years suddenly let out a call. It was weak and shaky, but clear enough to make her freeze in place. Those two words cut straight through the quiet. Wait, Harper. No one knew how long he had lived in the shadows of his own mind before that moment. To understand how much that voice meant, we have to go back to where everything began. Months earlier, in a quiet town in the east, there was a large house sitting on a low hill overlooking a long line of trees. It was beautiful, tidy, and upscale, but it lacked the most important thing, the warmth of people. That was where Mr. Rowan lived, or more accurately, where he existed day by day without really feeling anything at all. His mornings were always the same. He woke up when the first light slipped through the curtains. No alarm, no sound, just habit. He sat in the chair by the window, the one his wife used to love sitting in every morning. On the table was an old newspaper. Rowan picked it up, but never read it. His eyes drifted outside, watching leaves fall, watching joggers pass by, watching birds land and fly off again. He watched, but he didn't see. His mind felt empty, as if he had left every feeling behind years ago. Rowan used to be talkative, full of energy. But after his wife passed, his voice disappeared like someone had locked it away. The doctor once said there was nothing wrong with his vocal cords. No medical issue. His body could speak, his mind just wouldn't let it happen. He was trapped in a grief that made every sound feel foreign. For nearly 2 decades he didn't speak a single word. Not one. The cleaning ladies came and went. No one stayed long. They said he was hard to approach, not responsive, impossible to communicate with. But the truth was, he didn't want anyone stepping into a world that had already fallen apart. When they asked what he wanted to eat, he wrote a few short words on a slip of paper. When they tried to make small talk, he only gave a slight nod. It wasn't pride. It was the pain pulling him inward like a sealed box. In the house, there was a photo placed in the living room. His wife's picture. Every night, Rowan stood in front of it for a few minutes. His fingers touched the edge of the wooden frame. Each time he touched it, his hand trembled. Not because of age, but because the memories were still as sharp as day one. The house was too quiet, too spotless, too empty of life. Everything felt like a museum of the past that he couldn't escape. He lived on routine. Not hope, not expectation. His long days were nothing but repetition. Sitting by the window, eating a few simple things the cleaning lady left for him. Walking slowly through the hallway, stopping in front of his wife's photo. Then going to bed. No purpose, no connection, no warmth. A fading existence he didn't even notice. Sometimes Rowan tried to practice speaking. He stood in front of the mirror, lips parting like he wanted to say the name of the woman who once meant everything to him. But no sound came out. Only his eyes turned red before he gave up. It happened every time. He scribbled a few messy words on paper, then crumpled it. Those weak attempts only reminded him how long he had been trapped in silence. The house used to hold laughter, quick talks about plans for the day, gentle teasing every night before bed. Now there were only Rowan's lonely footsteps echoing across the floor. People around him slowly faded away. Old friends rarely visited. They didn't know what to say to someone who wouldn't speak. Rowan didn't blame them. He just stepped back, grew smaller, like he was fading out of his own life. As time passed, he felt himself slowly dimming, like a candle that had burned for too long. No one truly noticed that fading, and he didn't expect anyone to. Silence covered everything, so thick he couldn't remember the last time he wanted to change anything. But on one particular morning, when the sunlight hit the floor in a way that felt different, the front door opened. A young voice, clear and full of life, called out, "Good morning, Mr. Rowan." He looked up. That was the day Harper stepped into the house. It was also the day his silence began to shake. The morning sunlight slanted through the big window and made the room brighter than usual. And that was the moment Rowan saw the person who had just walked in. No loud noise, no rush. Just a young figure with a neat tool bag on her shoulder and a voice that was soft but fresh. "Good morning, Mr. Rowan." The greeting came out so naturally it broke through the thick silence in his house without even trying. Rowan looked up a little, more out of reflex than intention. Harper stood there with a smile that felt real. Not polite for the sake of it, not forced. It looked like the kind of smile she gave anyone she met. Harper was a young cleaning lady with a bright face and eyes that carried something gentle. She lived alone in a small apartment near the town center. Her job wasn't just cleaning. She did different work throughout the week to cover rent, online classes, and the sudden expenses that showed up, like car repairs or medicine. Even with her busy schedule, she kept the habit of greeting anyone sincerely, even if they didn't answer. Harper believed a kind greeting never cost anyone anything. Their first meeting was that simple. She greeted him, he glanced at her, then went back to his old newspaper as if nothing was worth noticing. But what made Harper different from the ones before her was that she didn't hesitate, and she didn't try to change him. Rowan's silence didn't make her uncomfortable. To her, everyone had their reasons for being quiet, and if he didn't want to speak, she respected that. During her first days on the job, Harper kept a comfortable distance. She watched Rowan's routine so she wouldn't bother him, but she wasn't nosy or overly curious. She understood what it felt like when someone didn't want others touching the softer parts of their life. So she simply did her work, gentle and quiet enough, but never cold. Sometimes, while she was cleaning the living room, she told small stories to lighten the heavy air, not to start a conversation, but because she felt the house deserved the sound of life. Harper talked about a neighbor who tried growing plants but managed to kill one in 3 days because he watered it too much. She talked about a stray cat that followed her all the way to her door but ran off every time she tried to pick it up. Rowan sat a few steps away, not turning his head, but the eyes in the mirror in front of him drifted toward her without him noticing. He didn't speak, didn't react, but his gaze softened just a little. As if those simple stories reached a place inside him he thought had gone quiet long ago. Harper's personality showed more clearly with each passing day. She liked writing reminders to herself on small notes. When she was tired, she wrote, "Keep going." When she was sad, she wrote, "You're still here." Those little lines helped her stay positive even when life wasn't easy. One day while cleaning the kitchen, she accidentally left a note on the dining table. On it was a small line in her neat round handwriting, "Hope is a quiet thing." Rowan saw it after she left. It had been a long time since he picked something up with that kind of attention. He read the note over and over, slow and thoughtful. The word hope made his chest ache, and the phrase, "quiet thing," felt like someone had just described him. He didn't know why, but he kept the note instead of throwing it away like he used to do with the things other cleaning ladies left behind. The next day, Rowan sat in the chair by the window as usual. But something was different. He waited for Harper's footsteps. He probably didn't even realize it himself, but he checked the clock a few times. When she opened the door and said her familiar greeting, he looked toward it longer than usual, his eyes holding on to that moment. Harper noticed something had shifted. Not anything obvious. More like someone who had only known how to stand still was now leaning just a little toward the light. She didn't say anything. She just gave him a soft smile and went on with her work. At the end of the day, as she was about to leave the house, Harper rested her hand lightly on the doorknob and turned back to look at him. Rowan was sitting in his usual spot. He didn't look at her, but she could feel that he was listening. In that moment, Harper told herself that whether he responded or not, whether he ever spoke again or not, she would still greet him every morning and still smile at him. Because sometimes someone needs to see a steady smile before they can believe life still has things worth moving toward. From that day on, Harper made one small but important decision. She would always show up with the best energy she had, and she would always keep that smile for Rowan, even if he stayed quiet in his silence. Ever since the day Harper decided she would always smile at Rowan, his house began to change in ways he didn't notice right away. Everything was still quiet, but the silence wasn't as heavy as before. It felt lighter, less suffocating, as if her presence had opened a small space for new air to slip in. Rowan still kept his routine of sitting by the window every morning, but what he listened for was no longer the wind or the birds outside. He started paying attention to Harper's footsteps in the hallway before she opened the door. Even though he didn't turn his head, his body tightened just a little, like someone waiting for something familiar, but afraid to admit it. When Harper was a few minutes late, Rowan checked the clock several times without understanding why he was doing it. Sometimes he scolded himself for it, but a few seconds later he glanced at the door again. That anticipation was so quiet he didn't notice it. But it was real. Over the next days, Harper worked as usual, telling more little stories while dusting or rearranging the shelves. She talked about a picky customer who made her clean the same spot over and over because he claimed to see an imaginary speck of dust. Or about a little boy at the market who asked her to tie his shoes. Those small stories made the house feel less silent in the most natural way. And then something no one expected happened. Rowan started responding. Not with his voice, but with small notes. The first time, he left a little slip of paper on the kitchen counter. "Thank you." Just 2 words. Harper saw it while she was washing her hands and almost froze. She picked it up, read it again and again, then smiled so much her eyes turned a little wet. Not because the handwriting was nice or the message was special. It was because it was the first real response she had ever received from him. The next day, Harper gently asked, "Are you doing okay today?" She wasn't expecting anything and went right back to her work. But when she walked into the living room, another note was on the table. "Okay." Harper touched the edge of the paper with her fingertip, feeling like someone had just opened a door inside a dark room. From that day on, Rowan left short but sincere notes. "Thank you. Okay. Are you tired today?" Even though each note was only a few words, to Harper, every single one felt as precious as gold. One afternoon, the sky turned a soft gray and the air felt heavier than usual. Harper cleaned more slowly and seemed quieter than normal. Rowan noticed it even though he pretended to read the newspaper. She stood near the window, her hand holding the edge of the table as if she needed it to steady her emotions. Eventually, she let out a breath and spoke like she was talking to herself more than anyone else. "Everyone's been so busy lately. Sometimes I feel like I don't have anyone who really cares. Like I'm surrounded by people, but no one hears me." Rowan lifted his head, listening with a focus he rarely gave anyone. He wasn't listening to the words, but to the feeling underneath her voice. Harper didn't look at him, but she didn't need to. She could sense his attention, quiet but unmistakably present. A few days later, Harper accidentally witnessed a moment that made her understand Rowan more deeply. While gathering cleaning towels in the living room, she saw him standing in front of his wife's photo. Rowan was completely still, his shoulders trembling slightly, his eyes filled with an old pain he had never spoken out loud. Harper quickly turned away so she wouldn't make him uncomfortable. But before leaving the room, she said softly, "If you ever want to talk someday, I'll listen." No pressure, no expectation, just a promise as light as a breath. Rowan didn't respond, but his hand tightened against the edge of the cabinet and his breathing slowed. He turned away quickly, afraid that if he stayed a few seconds longer, he would reveal something he had kept hidden for too long. But inside him, something trembled, like still water touched by a fingertip. From that day on, Harper began leaving little messages on table corners or window ledges, the same way she wrote reminders to herself each day. One heavy day is still a day you made it through. Pain doesn't mean you're broken. You don't have to speak, just feel. Rowan read each line slowly. He didn't throw them away. He didn't pretend they weren't there. He kept all of them on the wooden table beside his chair where the morning sunlight always landed. Then one morning, when Harper walked into the house as usual, there was a new note on the table. Not a single word. Not one of his short replies. This time it was a longer sentence, the kind someone thinks about for a long time before writing. Harper saw it, took a deep breath, and read each word. "You make the house less quiet." It wasn't just a thank you. It wasn't just a reply. It was the first real emotion Rowan had shown in almost 20 years. And that moment marked a quiet but powerful change inside him. After Rowan left that first note that held true feeling, Harper sensed clearly that something new had formed between them. She didn't know what the future would look like, but she knew one thing. This man was trying to open himself, little by little. And then on a calm afternoon, when she was assigned to clean out the storage room at the end of the hallway, the biggest truth about his life revealed itself. The storage room was old, a place almost no one ever entered. A thin layer of dust covered the cardboard boxes, a bookshelf leaned with one side broken, and small containers sat without labels. Harper opened the window to let in some light, then gently moved each item aside. When she pulled a wooden crate from the darkest corner, she saw a box older than everything else around it. The box was made of dark wood, its edges peeling a little. But it was sealed carefully, like someone had placed the hardest part of their life inside it. Harper set the box on the floor and opened it. Inside were not objects, not material keepsakes. They were letters. More than a dozen of them tied together with an old string. The paper yellowed, but the handwriting still clear. Even though she knew she shouldn't invade Rowan's privacy, Harper's hands trembled as she opened the first letter. The opening line made her throat tighten. "I still can't get used to the house without you." Harper kept reading, slowly, as if she was afraid of waking the pain sleeping inside each sentence. The second letter talked about how he couldn't fall asleep because every corner of the house still held the image of his wife. The third letter said he felt guilty for not being by her side in her final moments. The fourth described the first night he tried to speak out loud but couldn't. None of the letters were ever sent. None of them had ever left the house. Through each paragraph, Harper understood how he had lived all those years, alone with his longing, his guilt, and a helplessness no one ever witnessed. Every line felt like a sigh stretched across 2 decades. Harper picked up the last letter, and when she reached the sentence, "I'm afraid that if I say it out loud, I'll make you disappear all over again," her tears fell onto the page as she tried her best not to let it get wet. Harper didn't read any further. She gently tightened the bundle of letters and placed them back in the box. Her chest felt heavy. The sorrow she felt, the ache in her heart, helped her understand more clearly why Rowan chose silence, why he shut the door on his life so tightly. She carried the box to the living room, where Rowan was sitting as usual. When she approached him, she didn't speak right away. Rowan looked up, his eyes questioning when he saw her holding the old box. She sat down in the chair across from him and placed the box on the table between them. A long silence followed, but it wasn't the heavy kind. It felt like the moment right before someone says something important. Harper took a breath and opened the box, letting him see the letters inside. "I found these while cleaning the storage room," she said softly. Rowan froze. His lips parted, no sound coming out, but it was clear he had lost his composure. Harper continued, her voice still gentle but sincere. "No one can live with this kind of pain forever, Mr. Rowan." Rowan looked at the letters like he was staring at the part of his life he had tried so hard to hide. His hand trembled when he reached for one, then stopped halfway. Harper handed him a small notepaper and a pen. Rowan tried to write something, but the handwriting was shaky, nothing like the neat little notes he usually left. The emotions were too strong for his hand to cooperate. Harper gently placed her hand over his to steady it. "You don't have to face it alone," she said, honest and warm. The moment he heard that, Rowan lowered his head. His shoulders shook lightly. Harper had never seen anyone cry so silently yet so painfully. No sound left him, but the broken breaths and the way his hands tightened together spoke louder than any words. Harper didn't offer empty comfort. She simply sat close, letting him lean on her presence in the safest way possible. That moment wasn't a collapse. It was the first time in years that he finally let himself open up. Rowan had held his pain in silence for so long that when it finally found a way out, it felt like everything inside him was coming undone. When Rowan had calmed down a little, Harper closed the box of letters with both hands, not rushing, as if she wanted to honor every word inside it. She looked at him, her voice still gentle. "Maybe it's time you try writing your feelings again. Not for anyone else, just for yourself." It wasn't a command. It wasn't a request. It felt like placing a new doorway in front of him, letting him decide whether he wanted to step through or not. And those words became the beginning of the journey that would bring Rowan closer to the voice that had been silent for 20 years. From the day the old box of letters was opened, the atmosphere in Rowan's house changed again. It was still the same familiar quiet, but underneath it there was a different rhythm, slow but steady. Harper never brought up what happened that day, but her gentle presence told Rowan he didn't have to rush. Still, when night came, the weight of facing his feelings made it harder for him to sleep than before. One evening, with the whole house wrapped in the soft glow of a standing lamp, Rowan stood in front of the large mirror in his bedroom. He looked at the man staring back, hair grayer than he remembered, tired eyes, and lips that hadn't shaped a word in far too long. He tried to open his mouth, tried to form a simple sound, but nothing came out. Only a weak breath escaped his throat, trembling at the edges. Rowan closed his eyes, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. The feeling of failure washed over him again, the same feeling he had carried for years. He tried again. Lips parted, a deep breath, forcing his vocal cords to tremble. But nothing happened. A quiet anger rose inside him. Rowan curled his hand into a fist and pressed it lightly against his chest. not enough to make noise, but enough to show the frustration building inside. He turned away from the mirror and sat on the bed, letting out a sigh longer than usual. Sometimes he thought he would never get his voice back. Not because his body couldn't do it, but because his mind had grown too used to this silence. In the days that followed, Harper became more of an emotional anchor than ever. She sensed the changes in him without needing him to speak. She talked more, her voice gentle, not trying to break the silence but filling it with warmth. When she told him about a long, tiring day, she looked at him and said, "It's okay if you can't talk yet. Silence is still a feeling. There's nothing to be ashamed of." Rowan heard those words like he was being given a permission he had never dared to give himself. One late afternoon, with soft golden light spilling through the window, Harper looked noticeably tired. She set her tool bag on the chair and sat beside Rowan without thinking too much about it. Her eyes drifted shut for a moment, as if stealing a few seconds of rest. Then she let out a sigh, a real one, not hiding how exhausted she was. "I wish I had someone who understood me even half as much as you do," she said quietly, not expecting him to answer, not knowing how deeply those words would affect him. Bookmark. Rowan turned to look at her. The light falling across Harper's face made her look different, strong and fragile at the same time. Her words hit him hard. He knew she meant them. They weren't polite or casual. In that moment, Rowan wanted to answer. He wanted to tell her he understood her more than she realized. Wanted to tell her she wasn't alone. Wanted to say her name as a way of showing that her presence truly mattered. Without thinking, Rowan parted his lips. This time something felt different. It was as if the voice that had been locked away for years finally started to tremble inside his chest. He pushed it upward, trying to turn it into sound. And then, a small, rough noise escaped. Not clear, not a full word, but enough for Harper to open her eyes in shock. Rowan stiffened, his hand gripping the arm of the chair. He couldn't believe he had actually made a sound. Harper looked at him, her eyes wide but quickly softening. "You tried to say something, didn't you?" she asked, her voice full of emotion she couldn't hide. Rowan didn't answer with words. He still couldn't. But his eyes said everything. Harper gave him a small smile. She didn't clap, didn't overreact, didn't make him feel pressured. She just rested her hand on his arm and said, "I saw it. You're trying. And that's enough." Rowan looked at her longer than he ever had. In his eyes, there was something shaped by fear, but also a small trace of hope he had never shown before. When Harper stood up to leave, she turned back for one last look. Rowan was still in his chair, hands resting on his knees, his shoulders leaning slightly toward her, as if he wanted to hold on to that moment for a little bit longer. Harper didn't know that he was closer than ever, just one small step away from breaking the silence that had held him for 20 years. But he knew, and that made his heart beat faster than usual, as if his body had already decided before his mind could catch up. In the days after Rowan made that first sound, the house carried a strange kind of anticipation. No one said it out loud, but both Harper and Rowan felt something drawing nearer. The silence that had lasted for years was starting to crack in small places, like ice melting under the light. And then, on a morning that seemed ordinary, the moment finally happened. Harper was rushing to finish cleaning the living room so she could make it to her next shift. Because she was too focused on the pile of cleaning cloths in her hands, she didn't notice a small patch of water on the floor. As she walked across it, her foot slipped hard. Everything happened in a single second. The towels dropped, her body lost balance, and Harper tilted forward, her hand reaching instinctively into the air for something to hold on to. Rowan saw the whole thing. He shot up faster than he ever thought he could. By pure reflex, he rushed to catch her. His hands grabbed Harper just before she hit the ground. The catch wasn't forceful, but strong enough to keep her upright. Harper gasped, one hand gripping Rowan's arm to regain her balance. He held her tightly, his eyes full of worry he couldn't hide. "Are you okay?" Harper blurted out, even though she was the one who had almost fallen. Her voice shook a little from the scare. Rowan didn't answer right away. He looked at her, his eyes deeper and warmer than they had ever been. In that look there was fear, relief, and a quiet gratitude that she was safe. Harper started to step back, but Rowan was still holding her arm gently, as if he was gathering every bit of courage he had for what he was about to do. His throat moved. His lips parted. Harper thought he was just going to let out a long breath, but he wasn't. Rowan trembled. He tried slowly. A strained sound slipped out, thin as breath, but clearly not accidental. Harper froze, holding her breath, and then something no one dared to imagine finally happened. "Wait, Harper." 2 words. Short, weak, but real enough to make the whole room feel like it stopped. His voice was rough, cracked, like someone who had been through a storm for far too long. But it was real. Rowan's real voice after 20 years of silence. Harper lifted both hands to her mouth as tears spilled out uncontrollably. She stepped back, not out of fear, but because she was overwhelmed. You just spoke," she whispered, afraid that saying it too loudly would break the moment. Rowan swallowed hard, his chest rising and falling with all the emotions crashing through him. He couldn't say anything more, but the fact that he had spoken her name at all was a miracle he didn't understand how he managed to cross. Harper wiped her tears, stepped closer, and placed her hand on his shoulder. "You did it," she said, her voice shaky but full of pride. "You really did it." Rowan looked at her, his eyes wet and full of a kind of release he never thought he would feel again. He couldn't speak much yet. His voice was still weak, and his mind wasn't used to expressing emotions out loud. But the important thing was that he had crossed the line he thought he would live behind for the rest of his life. Harper didn't leave after that moment. In the weeks that followed, she stayed by Rowan's side, no longer just a cleaning lady coming in for her shift, but like a member of the family. She helped him practice pronouncing words bit by bit, patient, the same way she had always been with him. Rowan changed day by day too. He no longer hid behind the wall of silence. He no longer looked at life with distant eyes. He started learning to speak again, to feel again, to live again. And slowly, the house that had been cold for so long finally regained the warmth of human presence. The moment Rowan spoke Harper's name wasn't just the return of a voice. It was the return of a heart. And their story is a reminder that sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stay. One person patient enough to see the quiet beauty inside someone else. For an entire life to be saved, everyone deserves to be heard. Everyone deserves a chance to heal. And sometimes, simple kindness is the strongest thing in the world.